Welcome into episode 59 of the Two Pad Stack podcast. I'm your host, Ace, back at it again, here to break down some actual fun games, I suppose, this week. And alongside me, once again, we have Jake Reiser. Jake, how's it going, man?
It's going good. I'm not
Good.
mad.
Oh,
I said I was going to be mad if there weren't certain criteria met last week. They were met, so I'm not mad. I'm good.
yep, and I would have to give you your props right off the hop here. Asked you point blank, will Jim Montgomery last another 24 hours as the Boston Bruins head coach? And you were pretty clear that you didn't think that he would, and you friggin' nailed it, man. You nailed it.
4:45 on a Tuesday afternoon. I thought they were going to wait a little longer. I feel like it's totally in the Bruins' MO to news drop in some important things. And I think the Celtics were playing the then undefeated Cavs that night. So I was thinking like 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock at night in the middle of the game. That's when they do the
Yeah.
news dump. So maybe then props to them that they did it beforehand.
Yeah. I mean, I think that it was a decision that needed to be made. We already talked about the reasons why on the previous episode. So kudos for Don Sweeney actually making that decision to do that. But some of the stuff that's kind of come out afterwards, it's been very peculiar to learn about. And if you don't know, obviously Jim Montgomery was let go on Tuesday, the day we released the episode. And no less than 5 days later, he's already been hired by the St. Louis Blues. Does that seem a little fishy to you?
And that smells like the pier here. Smells a little fishy, a little rotten. There's
Yeah.
a couple of things here that stand out to me. Um, First off, the news. I don't know whether it was Ty Anderson or Frank Saravalli. One of the insiders came out and said this that Drew Bannister only had his interim tag taken off in St. Louis 3 days after the Bruins eliminated the Leafs in round one of the playoffs over the spring. So it feels like they had been sitting and waiting on, if the Bruins were going to lose, if they fired Monty at that time, that was probably their likely move. The fact that this is a 5-year deal says that both sides clearly liked each other from the get-go. I feel like a 5-year deal 5 days after you just got fired from your previous job, that's a big-ass commitment. And then also, Monty's first press conference today won't make any comments as to who reached out to who. It sounds like maybe there were some discussions, Monty in the last year of his deal with the Bruins, no contract. Maybe there was a little side talk going on. Hey, if you free up, we'd be interested. I don't know whether it was tampering on the Blues side or tampering from Monty's agent, like just putting the feelers on his side, but something just seems kind of rotten out of all of this. And I don't know whether it affected the play on the ice, and if so, shame on him. I would hope not. I would hope he takes his job as seriously as he can. But something's off about the whole thing.
That's my read on it as well. And I don't want to be the guy that says, oh, as soon as the coach is no longer the Boston Bruins coach, I'm going to point the finger at him because I really wanted to avoid that. I thought that he didn't have the team prepared. And I thought as a result of him not preparing the team appropriately, he was going to be fired based upon the performance. It's a performance based position. All NHL coach jobs are. They're a, what have you done for me lately type scenario. And obviously with the lofty expectations that the Bruins front office had and the lack of execution upon that thus far, it became abundantly clear that it was time for a change, as we had previously talked about. But like you had mentioned, there's something going on here, and there's other things that he take into account. Obviously, with the circumstances of Jim Montgomery's dismissal from Dallas, and St. Louis being the team that gave him a chance to get back into the NHL coaching environment, that obviously seemed to have some sort of merit, and he obviously carried an affinity toward the Blues. Whenever the Bruins visited St. Louis, he was always ranting and raving about St. Louis being amazing, blah, 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 blah. And then there's obviously the fact that his wife is from St. Louis, which
Hmm.
is also an interesting factor to consider here. Who knows what's going on behind closed doors with Mr. and Mrs. Montgomery, and I don't want to speculate on that front. But as a married man, I can tell you that the wife is very much a partner in the life and the career of the husband, right? Maybe she
Yeah.
said, hey, Jim, we don't have a contract for next year. And I bet you there's an opportunity for us to maybe go back home. And there's always that could come out. Now, I'm not going to actually name names here, but I did also see some speculation that while Jim Montgomery was under contract, he may have gone and visited and talked to the St. Louis Blues management team about a
Mm,
potential head coaching opportunity. So an interview may or may not have happened while Montgomery was a Boston Bruins coach. So,
that's stinky.
yeah. So my understanding now is, and this is just me reading between the lines, based upon that comment that was made during that introductory press conference with Blues media, where Jim Montgomery said, quote, he doesn't want to get into the particulars of when Blues GM Doug Armstrong first reached out to him coming to St. Louis and all these other factors that are coming into it. Obviously the fact that Montgomery had multiple, 3 to be exact, separate different offers from the Bruins front office. That was reported by Ty Anderson that 3 separate offers were made to Jim Montgomery to keep him as the head coach of the Boston Bruins in an extension. He declined all 3 of them. So with that, in fact, with in mind, with the wife situation in mind, his history in St. Louis in mind, I have to feel I have to conclude, that there's probably a backdoor deal that was made there to say, hey, ride out this season in Boston, and as soon as you're done with that, don't extend with them and come be our head coach. And he's probably like, hell yeah, let's do it. And unfortunately, that complacency might have seeped into
Mhm.
his game day planning. So I don't know. That's my take on it, and I'm not really stoked about it. But hey, Joe Sacco time.
I mean, so first off, I bet it's because they weren't gonna go 5 years. And one last this comes courtesy of Jared Book from Eyes on the Prize. There's a funny little timeline thing happening here. February 7th, 2017, Bruins fired Claude Julien. February 14th, the Habs hired him. February 28th of that year, the Habs acquired Steve Ott. November 19th, Jim Montgomery gets fired. November 24th, Montgomery gets hired by the Blues. The Blues coaching staff is now Montgomery, Ott, and Julien. That's just some funny timeline stuff.
Hmm. Yeah, that is intriguing. Well, the Boston Bruins, and we had talked about who we wanted to take over the bench boss role if the Bruins did let Jim Montgomery go. And there were some names thrown out there. Obviously, Sacco was one of the ones as an internal candidate. We kind of focused a little bit more on the external candidates here, but you know, obviously Jay Leach was another name that was thrown around. Um, the Boston Bruins have tapped Joe Sacco on the shoulder to take on the role as interim head coach. Now, a lot of the times when you see this, it's kind of like a lame duck coach scenario where they're just waiting for the offseason to come so the team can run a full, thorough head coaching analysis and search. I don't get that vibe from Don Sweeney in the press conference. I get the vibe of, hey, we believe in Joe Sacco. And as much as I want to gripe and moan about that, Joe Sacco has been in this organization for over a decade now. He served as an assistant coach under Claude Julien. He served as an assistant coach under Bruce Cassidy. He served as a associate head coach under Jim Montgomery now. So obviously there's some sort of affinity from the front office to his coaching abilities. He has the tenure. He's actually won a Jack Adams Trophy award as a head coach with the Colorado Avalanche. Took a team that was supposed to be a basement dweller and brought them into the playoffs. So there's some merit toward maybe considering him for that position, but I don't know. I don't know. What are your thoughts on the naming of Joe Sacco as the interim head coach?
It's giving Bruce Cassidy vibes. Remember, they let Bruce Cassidy ride, and then he rode so well, they just pulled the interim tag off of him and said, "Here you go." I mean, you gotta show faith in whatever you're doing as a hiring, and whether they let Sacco ride the rest of the year and then do a coaching search in the summer. I think it's all results based. You saw what happened with Bruce, that he rode them really well. They got through the 16-17 season and they let him, cook. And it was a really good experiment. And they pulled the interim tag because it worked well. You'll read the locker room. You'll see how they feel. You'll see the results. You'll see what the standings look like at the end of the year. That's when you make a decision. But for now, you got to have confidence that Sacco is your guy, because what else are you going to do? You know,
Yep.
it's not like we were the ones looking to hire Montgomery. We're the ones who just fired him. So you feel I don't feel bad. I don't feel bad for these teams, but you look at teams like the Red Wings and it's bad for the Penguins and Mike Sullivan, who probably should have fired their head coaches and poached Jim Montgomery if they could have. But now you're there sitting here going, what do you do? And so the Bruins were the first one to pull the trigger on something like this. And so you have to show faith. I don't know what else you do otherwise. I don't know what else Don Sweeney has to do otherwise. We said this last week that it's his ass on the line now. It's his last
It
chance to
is.
ride. And so, whatever move he was going to do, he has to have faith in it. So I'm not surprised that he's showing his utmost confidence in Sacco. He's getting us all sacked up. Maybe that's the name of the episode today.
It's all
Sacked up.
stacked up. I love it. Yeah.
But, the first two games of the Sacco era haven't been too bad.
No, and it's like what we expected this team to be, right? So we're going to break down these two games right now, but what we have are two hard-fought defensively sound efforts by the Boston Bruins, and the special teams were good enough to get it done here. So we'll start off with a riveting game against the Utah Hockey Club, the first ever visit by the Utah Hockey Club to TD Garden. I was in the house. It was a really negative crowd, I'll be honest with you, which you can kind of expect being on the heels of firing Jim Montgomery. I may have had a few pops in me, and I may have yelled, "Fire Jim Montgomery again," after the first three power plays didn't convert. But it was interesting. I think it was like the fourth power play or so in the second period where they've were finally able to get a shot to the net, a rebound situation, and one of the players that was brutally honest about their inefficiency this year, Elias Lindholm, converted on a rebound, and you could kind of see him look up into the heavens and like
Mhm.
say, "Thank you for taking that monkey off my back," because he really needed to get that one. So good on that effort by Elias Lindholm. Good job by that power play unit. It would have been nice to get maybe a couple more in this game because the Bruins were on the power play a lot.
It's not for lack of effort, though. They had, at one point, 17 shots on power plays alone,
Yeah,
which at one point was more than Utah had in the entire game in general.
yeah,
So it wasn't not even for lack of opportunity. It's not even for lack of effort either. I feel like in any other game prior to this, if we'd had 7 power plays, I would have said we had 6 shots total.
that's true. Yeah, and you would have given up like 3 shorthanded 2-on-1s.
Exactly. So
Yeah.
certainly not for lack of effort. And then Pasternak had the empty net goal that got taken away via coach's challenge for a missed game stoppage of a high stick, which upon replay was pretty obvious. But like,
Yeah.
come on, I would have loved to have seen that. But
Yeah, it was
um,
pretty egregious. I just was having PTSD in that third period. I was like, "Oh, only a one-goal lead, and they're gonna try to clog it up and turtle it, and they're gonna score, and then they're probably gonna score again in regulation, and the Bruins are gonna lose in regulation." But you know, big time shout out to Jonas Corposalo, who played a stellar game that game. And I mean, I'll give my kudos to Karel Vermelka as well, who actually I
mhm,
thought played really, really well. I mean, I thought David Pasternak had a heck of a game. He had a
yeah.
lot of shooting attempts, and Vermelka just stuffed him on everything, including multiple like backdoor one timers, things that you like almost even think that it's almost an automatic situation when Pasternak can get those off, that it's at least going to go in like 60% of the time. No, Vimelka was just standing tall. But yeah, like I was saying, Corpusalo, I mean, how many games finish 1-0 in the NHL these days? Not
Not very
many.
many.
Not many. When you get over 20 shots against, I mean, the average NHL save percentage is somewhere like 900, right? So if
Yeah.
you have 20 shots on goal, the expected goals against in that situation would be 2. And he put up a big old donut. Like he was stellar in that game. I thought he was moving well. I thought he had good rebound control. I thought he was positionally sound that game, and he looked very confident. And when you have a goaltender that's playing that way, it just oozes confidence toward your defense. If your defense has faith to say, okay, if I get beat here, Jonas has my back. They're not going to be diving around and scrambling around in desperation, and they're able to just play their game and not worry about, jumping behind the goalie and try to prevent a goal like what happened all the time when, Tim Thomas was in net, which who knows how the hell he made all those saves, but you get the idea. So yeah, I really, really liked Jonas Corposalo's game against the Utah Hockey Club.
But you bring up Tim Thomas, and it goes back to the past 10 or 15 years. It's the Bruins' MO. You have a confident goalie and a team that is assured he's going to make saves, whether he's aggressive like Tim or athletic like Jonas or very astute like Jeremy can be at times. It's from the net out. That's how the Bruins have played and found success over the last 10 and 15 years. And to see Jonas stand on his head the way he does, I believe he leads the NHL in high danger chance save percentage, which I don't know if that's also an indictment on the Bruins for how many high danger chances they allow, but I'll make it a positive for Jeremy Sway or not Jeremy for Jonas Corposalo here that he's just done so well. We said this. Give him time. Let him work with Baba Senza, and clearly it's worked. So credit to him. Credit to the team. We'll talk about the Detroit game as well. But I think the one big quality I want to take out of these two games as well is they're going back to basics, and that's what's
Absolutely.
winning them these games.
Yeah, and I'll also say that I feel like the breakout seems much more consistent. I
Hmm.
don't know if it was like a true system shift. I only coach mites. I'm not an NHL caliber coach, so I can't really dissect the X's and O's to really identify what the difference is. But it seems like they're able to avoid the forecheck more efficiently right now. And I don't, like I said, it may be a staff thing. It may be a personnel thing. It may be a systems thing, but they're breaking it out of the zone and they are able to dump it in and they're winning their races on the forecheck. It's simple hockey. It's the formula that was always going to work for the Boston Bruins if they were going to be a strong team this year because they're not going to speed their way to a win. They're not going to skill their way to a win. They need to play strong system defense and team offense if they're going to get the W. And that's what they did. They squeaked out a 1-0 win against Utah. And then what do? They go on the road against the Detroit Red Wings, where Little Caesars is usually a house of horrors for the Boston Bruins. It always seems like Dylan Larkin and his upstart young group of Red Wings just absolutely play their little hearts out against the Boston Bruins. Even in that, record setting year last year, the Bruins struggled over there. They always seem to kind of struggle, but the Bruins got the better of the Red Wings, especially in the third period, which was a fantastic change of pace for me. A lot of the times, especially this year, even when they've won a couple of games in a row, the Bruins kind of shut it down in the third and they get kind of hemmed in and they're hemorrhaging offensive opportunities. The Bruins were the one that came out and were the aggressor at the beginning of that third period, and that was a great change of pace.
So that was going to be my gripe about the end of the game in Utah. Maybe that was the stagnancy as a whole. Both teams didn't get a lot of shots on net. Boston had 5, Utah had 7. The Bruins came out firing. It's like their energy picked up throughout the whole game. They played with intensity. They saw the urgency. They felt the hunger pangs, and they were like, you know what? Let's go out and do it. And they shut down Detroit when it mattered most. They outshot the Red Wings 13-5 in the third period. When's the last time we
Excellent.
thought the Bruins had A, more than 10 shots in the third period, and B, outshot anybody in the third period? So it's these little things that hopefully add up to make a big difference going forward. But in the first two games, it's really good positives to see. Another big positive, look at that PK going 4-for-4 against the number 6 power play unit in the league in the Detroit Red Wings. Special teams stepping up when they need to. You talked about the power play getting it done in Utah or against Utah. How about the PK getting it done against Detroit? Stepped up exactly when they needed to, played really smart hockey, didn't feel like they were much of a threat on many of those chances. I'm really happy with that.
Yeah, absolutely. And one guy that I think will really kind of come out and stand out as my performer in that PK situation, I thought Nikita Zadorov played his best game as a Boston Bruin in that game. I've been a little critical of him, despite me thinking that he has all the tools that he needs to be a very successful high tier NHL defenseman. Sometimes he just wasn't utilizing them the right way. That game was stellar by him, especially in that third period and on those penalty kills that he was on out there. He was, taking away space. He was blocking out passing lanes. If Joe Sacco kind of unlock defensive zone beast Nikita Zadorov, like give the guy a 3-year contract right now and keep him here. Like that is some beautiful, beautiful stuff. And with that contract that we have Zadorov signed to, that's the kind of play that we're going to need out of him.
In those last 5 minutes of the game, when your butts are clenched in a one-goal game, just hoping you can cling on to that win. And I wanted the Zadorov on almost the entire 5 minutes. Just the way he was. You're right. He took away space. He was shutting everything down. If that's the Nikita Zadorov we can see more consistently, then he's at least worth more of the money. I'm not going to pay all of the money, but he's at least worth more of the money that's on the cap for him because I'm with you there. I was severely impressed with his game.
Yeah, Absolutely. So let's go ahead and so we already talked about Sacco so far. Um, we talked about Monty to the Blues. Now, with Montgomery's departure, it's not like the Bruins brought in a new coach. So there's now a void on the coaching staff. So some of those responsibilities that were being handled by Sacco have now been handed over to Chris Kelly. He's still handling some of them, but now Sacco has a whole lot of other responsibilities that were just thrown onto his plate. So how are the Bruins going to go ahead and slice up and dice up that responsibility list with one less coach? Now, do you necessarily need to have 4, 5, 6 coaches in the NHL level? I don't know. It seems like some of the more successful teams have a really large contingent of coaches, but my thought is, do the Bruins need to go out externally and bring in another coach? Don Sweeney expressed some sort of thought toward doing that during the press conference about Montgomery's dismissal. Said that he may look to bring in somebody, but he was also very clear that bringing in somebody was not necessarily for the head coach position.
Mhm.
So it's more of a supplemental coach. So um, let me go ahead and hand it over to you, Jake. If you could go and do your holiday shopping for the Boston Bruins assistant coach. I'm not going to ask you for names, but if you have names, great. What are you looking for in a new associate or assistant coach for the Boston Bruins?
3 words: power play specialist. I think if you can let Sacco and let Kelly cook on the defensive side of things, on the two-way side of things, you need someone who's gonna revamp that power play because you win on special teams. I know that even if it's an offensive specialist, if you wanna set fine, an offensive specialist, someone who's gonna work on the 5-on-5 because their 5-on-5 offense still isn't great. But if you need a power play that's unpredictable in the best way, you want a power play that everybody is a threat to score, whether it's the bumper, the half walls, the point, the goal line guy. Maybe the goal line guy pulls out into the screen and is there to collect dirty rebounds. You need to make that power play a lot more efficient. And so whether it's power play specialist, offensive specialist, whatever you want to call it, that's the highest on the wish list. If not, then you have to go completely in the other direction. If you're not going to go for the offense, then someone who's a PK or a defensive specialist. If they think they can handle the offense and they're fine with low scoring games, then someone who's going to continue to shore up the defensive structure. But I'd rather go for the former. I'd rather try and get that offense cooking a little better.
Yeah, I'm 100% in agreement with you. And this particular player that I'm going to propose is currently under contract, so it's not really feasible right this moment. But how great would it be to bring Mark Savard back to Boston? That guy was a wizard with puck distribution, made some of the most creative passes that I've ever seen in a black and gold uniform. He's currently a coach with the Toronto Maple Leafs, unfortunately, which he always was very um, loving and appreciative of the fans in Boston. And even when he was with the Calgary Flames, he was always talking about how great Boston was. And, I don't know, it hurt me a little bit inside knowing that my impressionable Bruins fan years had him as a large piece of that. I mean, he came on alongside Zdeno Chara in free agency back in, I don't know, when was that, 07, 08 or something like that.
Hmm.
um so I think that him going in there, he would probably be able to see things that a Chris Kelly isn't able to see, whether that's personnel and some skill sets that would mesh well with others. Because let's be candid, I mean, you alluded to it just a second ago, Jake. Chris Kelly was a two-way centerman. He was a
Hmm.
PK specialist, really. Bottom six guy, third line center, maybe wins face-offs when you need him to win them. He was never a power play guy. Never. So how are you having the power play be run by a guy that's never actually been a big power play guy himself? Now, I'm not saying every coach needs to be an expert of every single position that they're coaching, but I would like to think that you gain a little bit of credibility with the players that you're coaching if you've actually done it yourself. So,
I have two names, two former players in mind, both with very different amounts of coaching experience that could be interesting. One who's had no coaching experience whatsoever, but one who still seems to be around the team, one who's loved by the city, a guy who just recently had the C on his chest in the Spoke Bee. I think St. Patrice would be really fun to have behind the bench. Bring a lot of credibility back. I don't. My only concern on that is if it would undermine Marchand having him in the room. But I think Patrice would be great He'd be a fun influence. But I think the guy who maybe I would look more logically towards, someone who's already had NHL assistant coaching experience as much as he hasn't stuck, and maybe that's because he hasn't been in the right role, is another guy who has worn the spoke to be, won the Stanley Cup in 2011 and rode off into the sunset after that. That's Mark Recchi.
Yeah, I like those picks too. Mark Recchi did that power play thing. Now, he wasn't like a puck distributor or a sniper or anything like that, but he was savvy in front of the net and had a really good hand-eye situation where he could tip in pucks and clean up the trash out front, which, we're going to talk about some other stuff going on around the league with somebody else that might be able to do that maybe would be a good fit for the
Mhm.
Bruins. But I really do like that suggestion of Mark Recchi. The other name that I'm kind of thinking of is when the Bruins were back up on their rise to relevancy. They're coming out of the dark days of Dave Lewis and, the Joe Thornton era and everything like that. When they first started punching back up at the Montreal Canadiens back then, a big part of that team, and he was part of the Joe Thornton trade, was Marco Sturm. And I also am curious
Mhm.
about that name. And I know he's probably more of a candidate for head coaching positions right now. And I believe he's under contract with an NHL team right now as well. I don't know
He's with the
which.
Ontario Reign in the
Okay.
AHL.
Okay, so yeah, I know he was an assistant coach with LA for a little bit. He must have been bumped over to head coach with their AHL affiliate. But I would love to see, him considered for a power play specialist assistant coach position as well. And honestly, at the end of the season, if they decide not to continue with Sacco, I think he'd be a good candidate as well. And I think you maybe brought him up when we were talking about,
Mhm.
coaching candidates for head coach. So that's another name I would think of. So, before we go to our studs and duds, let's go ahead and take a moment to recognize our sponsors for this season, and we will be right back.
This season, the Two Pad Stack podcast is proudly supported by two fantastic local businesses. First, we're going to give a shout out to Earth Eagle Brewings, where great beer meets great company. With locations in both Portsmouth and Somersworth, New Hampshire, Earth Eagle is something for everybody. Whether you're relaxing in their Portsmouth beer garden or enjoying live music and trivia at the Somersworth pub, you'll be in good hands with their craft beers, epic hot dogs, and much more. And don't forget, if you're into brewing your own beer, their homebrew shop has you covered in Somersworth. And when it comes to tattooing, there's no better place than Vital Ink Tattoo in Barrington, New Hampshire. The artists at Vital Ink are all about turning your ideas into tattoos you'll love forever. The team works hard to make sure every visit is comfortable, and their dedication to making your tattoo experience fun and relaxing is unmatched. Whether you're getting your first piece or adding to your collection, Vital Ink is the place to go. Special thanks to both of these sponsors for supporting the Two Pad Stack podcast this season. Be sure to check them out and show them some love.
All right, we're back. So, studs and duds. Now, we're kind of doing the same thing that we did last time. Now, we're not all going to go players here, but Jake, I'm going to go ahead and let you go first with your studs and duds today.
Absolutely. Um, my stud of the week is Elias Lindholm. Getting that monkey off his back in that power play goal is huge. But to me, it's also looking and making sure he's still being a 200-foot player. In the Utah game, he went 53% in the faceoff dot. In the Detroit game, he was 65% in the dot, 13 for 20. That's what I love seeing as well. I think he had a really efficient 2 games. I think he looks strong. I think again, the whole motto of getting back to basics, score goals, win faceoffs, make sure your team gets possession, be smart, and that's the definition of a 200-foot player for me. And he's looking like it. If he can keep this up, just put a couple of goals in, keep winning faceoffs, stay above 500. I think he's at 52 or 53% on the season right now for his total. Yeah, 52.8% for his faceoff percentage on the season so far. If he can bump that up to 56, 57%, then I'm really happy. And I think this week was honestly a really good showcase for both of the guys who signed via free agency. I know we talked about Zadorov earlier, but I think it's a good thing to talk about Elias Lindholm in this way that, he's scoring, he's looking more comfortable. I think they're trying to find that right role for him. He's simplifying his game, and it's showing. So that's my stud of the week, Elias Lindholm. My dud of the week is the AHL pipeline. And what do I mean by that? I thought Georgi Merkulov looked really good in his couple of games up in Boston. I know he had a great assist on Trent Frederick's goal a couple of weeks ago or last week. I thought he's looked good. He skated well. He's had clean zone entries. Who knew the Bruins could have clean zone entries for once, just skating the puck into the zone? And then he gets sent back down for Mark McLaughlin. And it just surprised me a lot. And then what did Merkulov do? He goes ahead and scores a beautiful overtime goal at home against the Lehigh Valley Phantoms. What are we doing not having that kind of talent up at the big club? So that's what confuses me, and I don't know if that's a Sweeney thing, if that's an AGM thing. I think Evan Gold might be the GM of the Providence Bruins, so I don't know who's making those decisions off the top of my head. But whoever is, it's just surprising to me. So that's my dart of the week. That if you're gonna keep flip flopping these guys up and down the pipeline, again, we keep talking about this ad nauseum. Bring up a Vinny Lettieri, bring up and keep up Merkulov, considering how well he's playing. Fabian Lysell, guys who are going to bring offensive flash and not just another guy who is like Justin Brazeau light to me at this point. I'm sorry, Mark McLaughlin. I think you're really good, but you're like Justin Brazeau all over again. So I don't know. That's my dud of the week. I really couldn't point to anybody on the NHL roster who stood out to me as a giant negative this week, and that's a really good thing. But just if you're going to balance out this roster with the worst prospect system in the league, at least use your good prospects. So that's my dud of the week.
Fair enough. I could definitely agree with that. And that's kind of like bleeds over, I think, to just the front office in general and some of the personnel decisions they make. But it'll be intriguing to see what McLaughlin does this week moving forward, because he has been called up even though he was the healthy scratch against Detroit. So we'll have to see. Studs and duds. I've got a stud that I'm going to anoint and an honorable mention as well. And then I've got a dud. So my stud, I'm going to start off with somebody that I was pretty critical of last episode before. Probably was even one of my duds. I can't remember. But in a time where this team needed leadership badly, obviously the players said all the right things. You know, it's our responsibility that the coach has been let go. We're not performing. You know, candidly, Brad Marchand is underperforming. Charlie McAvoy's underperforming. Jeremy Swayman's underperforming. The list goes on and on and on. The guys that are supposed to be leaders were underperforming. After Montgomery's dismissal, I have to say that I think that Brad Marchand did his job. I think that he went out there and he led by example. He wasn't making bonehead plays. He was moving his feet well. He was generating offense. The Boston Bruins need top 6 scorers. They need top 6 wingers that can score. Brad Marchand should be that. And especially again in the Detroit game, he definitely did that. He had an absolute beautiful snipe in the third period. He was the one that got that goal to put the Bruins up in the third period over the Detroit Red Wings. And it was vintage Brad Marchand. It wasn't just a sloppy goal out front or a rebound, which we'll take them. We don't ask how, we ask how many, right? But it was vintage Brad Marchand. Comes around, loses his check, swoops around the circle, and sends a snapshot bar down. Like it was like shades of 2013 Brad Marchand. It was gorgeous. And that really got the team going. And you could see his emotion. You know, this is not a family show. He looks over to the
Red
Detroit
Wing bench, yeah.
and he says, "Fuck you," or something along those lines. And he caught it on camera. So Brad Marchand dragging the Bruins into the fight. And that's what you want from Brad Marchand. That's why he's wearing the C, because he can be that catalyst for the Boston Bruins. And he did that in Detroit. And for that reason, he's my stud of the week. My honorable mention for this goes to a player that I've already given a lot of kudos to this year. Somebody that just goes into the game with reckless abandon and fought one guy not once, but twice in the same game and was flying out there and hit the post. Very easily could have had a goal himself, and that's Mark Kastelik. I am in love with this guy's game. And I said that at the beginning of the season that he's going to be a guy that Bruins fans are going to adore. And it's true. I love it. He plays the game in a way that just brings me 6 to midnight, dude. It is just, it is stellar. So I really, really love what he was doing. Beat the crap out of Rob Bertuzzo twice. So really, really like that. I almost gave him the nod, but I have to respect the captain in this situation here. So wrapping up my studs there, my dud of the week goes to Jim Montgomery. And I know that's the easy, like low hanging fruit for this pick this week. But, the easy thing for him, if he truly wanted to go, was to just finish up the season and go. All the stuff that's come out in the news afterwards about tampering and was he just, even like 98.5 the Sports Hub has come out and said, was he just intentionally fucking up in order to get let go so he can go coach St. Louis before. I think that's obviously a little hasty or maybe premature to ever suggest something like that. But I mean, the fact that the situation is what it is and that can even be discussed is a problem inherently in itself. So I don't think Jim Montgomery had his big boy pants on when he decided to coach this season. And the way that he was talking in the pressers over in St. Louis, you were still technically Bruins property for a part of this week. So you're my dud of the week, Jim Montgomery.
I agree wholeheartedly with your choices there. And I kind of want to throw in an honorable mention. You talked about press conferences and you talked about Marchand stepping up and being a leader.
Yeah.
My favorite quote of the week actually comes from who I think is the future captain of this team, and that's Charlie McAvoy. See, he just nailed it on the head. Said we lost it. I don't know what it was, but whatever it was, we lost it. And you have to remind yourself, we're so blessed to play this beautiful game when we have this amazing opportunity. We have to go out and take advantage of it. He spoke exactly like how a future captain should. I was remarkably impressed with how he handled everything this week.
He was very eloquent. And that's always been the thing that Charlie McAvoy that has been something that I admire is his way to really kind of analyze not just the game of hockey, but how to work with your teammates and how to, not just teammates, but just people in general. So really right there with you. I was pretty inspired about that. I saw one tweet that went out. I forget who it was. And it's like, oh fuck, are you gonna make me believe again?
I
Like
think that's Marina.
yeah. So shout out to Marina from Barstool on that one there. But yeah, I 100% agree. I would like to see McAvoy. I think he actually got back to his shooting game too. I think he had
Yeah.
like 5 shots on goal against Detroit, which was great to see because he can get those wrist shots from the point on net, and then that can cause a lot of chaos. And especially with Hampus Lindholm still being out, the Bruins need that volume shooter from the point, which if I'd called Hampus Lindholm a volume shooter last year, I would have been surprised. But he definitely was a different guy this year. But yeah, I 100% agree. So that wraps up studs and duds. We're gonna have probably a little bit of a shorter episode this week, but a couple of notes before we jump into the week ahead. Our good friends down in the Big Apple, the New York Rangers, they seem to be getting a little impatient with what's going on with the Rangers. There were some reports out by Elliot Friedman that they are they have quote made it very clear they are interested in making moves and shaking up their roster. And the names that are currently being considered for trade transactions are Chris Kreider and Jacob Trouba. Now, Jacob Trouba's been in the media before about prospective deals and being traded, but he has a full no movement clause, so he had full control of that destiny. But how much does knowing the fact that your team wants to actively move on from you impact your willingness to waive? Now, he's got some IRL stuff going on with his wife being a doctor in New York and everything like that, but I'm intrigued with that. I mean, obviously, I alluded to it earlier in the episode. Chris Kreider brings a lot of what this Boston Bruins team needs right now. Now, whether it's feasible and realistic for the Bruins to be able to go out there and get him, I don't want them to spend draft capital because it's just not a place where the Bruins have a surplus of right now. But Chris Kreider would look good in black and gold.
If it could somehow get done, I'd drive the fucking moving van myself and pack up his whole apartment and bring it back up to Boston. And I loathe to say that to a BC Eagle. I still maintain my rivalry with them years later as a BU Terrier. But man, would he be so good on this Bruins team. He is the embodiment of what, like, the Bruins culture actually should be: grimy and gritty, but putting everything in the back of the net. He's always in the right place to jam home a rebound. on the power play, he finds that empty space. He's exactly who I'd want on that second line left wing. I don't care whether you're moving Marchand down to a third line or where I don't know how that lineup would look. Um, Whether it would involve in someone like a Morgan Geekie. I saw someone put Morgan Geekie, Charlie Coyle, Fabian Lysell as a package for Kreider, which I don't think that would get the needle for the Rangers. I think he's a really high leverage guy for them, but um, I think Kreider would be a fantastic Bruin. The cap would certainly have to work for that too, because he's got a hefty amount of money for a couple of years, and he'd be 35, I think, at the end of this contract. So he's older too. So there are a little bit of concerns in that regard, but
Yeah. I guess my only concern also is the last time we traded with the Rangers for Rick Nash, we got punched in the mouth. That's not it's not the Bruins' fault either. I mean, obviously health was an issue with Rick Nash and the
yeah.
concussion problems that he was dealing with. But we lost Ryan Lindgren, who's become a very serviceable top 4 D man for the Rangers, and they
Mhm.
also got a pick out of it too. And they definitely got the better of that transaction. So do we want another large power forward older guy from the Rangers for a decent haul, or would it be better off to let that go elsewhere? But I'll tell you what, there's been rumors that Don Sweeney's been out searching for a power forward with scoring ability that hasn't necessarily, they're kind of like unicorns in the NHL, right? You know, there's only so many
Mhm.
of those available. So now that one's publicly available, I can't imagine, you know, Don Sweeney hasn't at least made a phone call to check in.
That first round pick that we gave up actually ended up going to Ottawa and it ended up being Jacob Bernard Docker. That's a pretty interesting one.
Huh. That'll be a good trivia thing
Yeah,
to know.
exactly. I mean, the Rangers did very well for themselves in that first round. Otherwise, they got Keandre Miller, who is
Great
one of
player.
their also, yeah, exactly. Phenomenal top 4 defenseman for them. And then while he didn't pan out with the Rangers, they got Nils Lundqvist, who I think
He's over with Dallas, I
is
think,
with
right?
Dallas. Yeah, and he's doing okay in Dallas, I believe. So,
Yeah.
um,
More shrewd work by Jim Nill over there, who's one of my top GMs in the league, as far as I'm concerned.
oh, absolutely. That's where the draft was held to. It was in Dallas.
Home cooking.
Lots of parallels, but yeah. To go back to your comment about hearing your name on the trade block making you more inclined to want to waive, there was a lot of chatter over the summer regarding Trouba going to the Red Wings. He's from Rochester, Michigan. He's a big Michigan guy. I don't know whether he went to Michigan, but there was a lot of chatter about him in Detroit. He's a Michigan Wolverine alum, so it would have made a lot of sense if it's probably the only place he would have gone. But the fact that even the chatter was there, that it felt like it was almost even at the finish line. I certainly agree that, you hear your name getting called. You hear it a lot in baseball that these guys, they're like, okay, you want to move me? Move me. It affects your game. It gets in your head. And so if you're going to move a guy, if you hear that you're going to get moved, sometimes you just want to say, do it, get it over with as soon as you can so I can get back to playing my game. So
Yeah.
it's not even out of a, like, I hate being here because you want me gone moment. It's if you're going to do it, then just let me go so I can keep playing and get this out of my head type of a mentality.
Yeah. I mean, but for me, like, if I knew that if my boss didn't want me here, or the owner of the company didn't want me here, I wouldn't want to play here. I wouldn't want to work here. Like, I'll go find somewhere that does want me here and thinks I can be part of a solution and not a problem. So
Hmm.
that's always something that I kind of think of. But um, we're going to go ahead and take a quick peek at the week that will be. So obviously, this week that we just had were pretty light, which is optimal for coaching changes, with like we talked about. So only 2 games this last week, but next week we're going to have a little bit of a crazy schedule. I mean, the Boston Bruins always have the Black Friday, Thanksgiving showdown is what it's called now. The Black Friday matinee, but we will be underway with former Bruins montages galore coming in with the Vancouver Canucks in town. Seems like every Bruin that left from last year decided, hey, let's go to Vancouver. I heard that weather's nice over there.
Hmm.
So our old friend Jake DeBrusk, old friend Danton Heinen, and I don't know. I think
Derek
Forbert is
Forbert.
injured. I think he's injured right now, but Derek Forbert is a member of the Vancouver Canucks as well. So they will be in town here on the day that you're listening. If it's Tuesday, that's the 26th. One interesting note about that matchup is that the Vancouver Canucks are 7-1 on the road right now. So it will be interesting to see how Joe Sacco's Boston Bruins are able to contain the high flying Canucks with Quinn Hughes, Brock Besser off to a good start. Obviously, Elias Pettersson is a dangerous player, and now they got Jake DeBrusk up the wing, and I bet you DeBrusk will be motivated to play the Boston Bruins. So that'll be a fun one to watch. Any thoughts on that matchup, Jake?
Just a lot of nostalgia, a lot of fun. Um, I'll give credit to the Vancouver organization, which feels like a weird thing to do post Jim Benning for how many years he bungled that team. That even in the wake of, Thatcher Demko is supposed to be the goalie of the future and he continually gets hurt. They did a lot of roster turnover. They had to bring in Rick Tocchet. They've got a good thing going for them. Tocchet's got them playing really well. They're an interesting team to watch. A guy who would have also loved on the fourth line is going to come into town. He's finally healthy again. Is Dakota Joshua. Congratulations to him for overcoming his battle with cancer.
Yeah.
But man, I would have loved him on the fourth line. Big giant guy who can put stuff in the back of the net and knock your head off. He would have been beloved here. As much as we love Casty, but that's going to be a really fun game overall. Shelovs is an interesting goalie. He was kind of thrown into the spotlight and he's shined as much as he can. So I'm really impressed with that.
What was the other goal you just mentioned before Shelov?
Thatcher Demko.
Oh yeah, so I guess Demko was just in Boston with the team and practiced, and I guess he looked really good and looks like he's close to a return. So I'd be curious if we maybe saw Demko as well on Tuesday. So something to keep an eye out for. After that, the Bruins, I think, have they even had a back-to-back yet this year?
Yeah, they've had one, I think.
Okay. So they're going to have a back-to-back. They're going to go on the road and play the league's most boring team ever, the New York Islanders. Can you think of a team that's more boring, like altogether, not just on the ice play, but like branding and social media and fans and everything like that? A more boring team than the Islanders. And I'm sorry, Islanders anxiety people from Fans First Sports Network, if you ever listen to this, but your team is just bleh.
If they're the team that continually goes backwards, it's the Islanders here. And look, they at least did something in signing Anthony Duclair in the offseason. But Patrick Waugh as a head coach doesn't feel like the right culture for that team. It feels like it doesn't mesh well with Lou Lamoriello, who, Lou, I love you. You are the name on the Hockey East trophy. You've done so much for the sport. But move on.
Yep.
I mean this in a loving way. Like, the culture and the modality of the NHL has passed you by. And your fans, I know Islanders fans who are immensely frustrated with his lack of change for the most part on anything with this team. And it hasn't worked. Do something. His big moves backfire in the last couple of years. My biggest one looking at, they sent Devon Toews to the Colorado Avalanche for a second round pick, and now Devon Toews is one of the best two-way defensemen in the entire league. Like, they exhaust me is the best way I can say that. Like, if we had a hard time in the past couple of weeks as Bruins fans, like, I'm sorry, Islanders fans, that you have to watch the hockey and endure the front office that you guys have for a lot of different reasons.
Yeah, it's not good over there, and in the island. It is in the island, right, or on the island? What do you say?
I think it's on the island, down the shore on the island.
Okay, there we go. Yep. Well, Rugsy, my buddy, if he hears me say that, he's gonna yell at me. So I'm sure I'll hear it from him. So yeah, they'll be playing the Islanders in New York on Wednesday. So the Bruins are gonna take a quick little flight down to the island, and then they're back at home for that matinee Black Friday tilt. So they'll be playing Pittsburgh this time. I don't think they've usually played Pittsburgh for this game. It's usually another team. I think it's usually the Rangers.
Yeah. They did a couple of years ago, pre-pan, they played the Penguins once and they won handily enough, I want to say. But I wonder who's going to be coach for the Penguins by the time Friday rolls around, because it looks like Mike Sullivan's head is really far down on the chopping block with the guillotine already swinging away.
Well, I'm sure Charlie McAvoy has some family tickets available for him, so if he wants to go watch the game, he can sit in the box with Kylie and everything. So, all right, so that'll be an interesting one. That'll be nationally televised. So keep in mind, check your TV listings, check your TV guides. I know you all still get those. And then finally, the climactic centennial game. That'll be on December the 1st. That's going to be Sunday. And I'll be in the house there, which I'm very excited about. Are you going to be there by chance, Jake?
I wish. I've got some other things I've got on the docket. I will be watching as much as I can, though.
Great.
Um, I hope the jerseys look as good as the ice as I hope they do, because I hear the rumors that these centennial jerseys, or some version of them in the fashion of the 80s, 90s jerseys, will be the new de facto set starting next year. We're going to have a whole redesign suite because Fanatics will finally be ready to take that on. So that would be really fun. But they're going to go up against a very, I want to call them frustrated, is probably the best word for it. They're very frustrated Montreal Canadiens team who, like, it's one step forward, two steps back for them as well. They're not having a hot season. They're 7-11-2. Marty St. Louis having a tough time behind the bench. They've got some really interesting pieces. Nick Suzuki, Cole Caulfield, Lane Hudson, Arbor Xhekaj. Like, they've got interesting pieces on that roster, but it's not gelling well. So it's a frustrated team going into a rivalry match. And sometimes that's the fun of it, that they let the rivalry get to them and it becomes a really feisty match. I almost want it to feel like a historic game for this being the Centennial matchup. I want to see the
100%.
big bad bees come out. I want to see a really fiery game. That would, like, really embody the, like, final celebration of this Centennial year.
And it's really also cool. And I don't know if you guys know that are listening, but this game is called the Centennial Game, and it's not the Centennial season anymore. But this is the final kind of culmination of all these efforts. And the reason why they're doing it on this day is it's 100 years to the day when the Boston Bruins played against the Montreal Maroons back in 1924. So, really interesting. I can't wait for that game. I think it'll be a fun one. Looking forward to being in the house with my brother. But we'll definitely be able to break down all of these games and more news wise around the league next time we talk to you guys for episode number 60. So, any closing remarks today, Jake, before we wrap up?
It's a jam-packed one. Go jam-pack our week with some wins. Go jam-pack your stomachs with some turkey. Have a happy
Great
holidays.
point.
We're getting into the holiday season. Happy Thanksgiving, everybody.
Absolutely. Yeah. To those of you that are celebrating Thanksgiving, I hope you guys spend some wonderful time with your family. We appreciate you. We're going to give you thanks for your listenership and your support throughout the time here with the podcast here. And, I hope you guys are able to, make yourself a nice leftover sandwich for the Black Friday game. I'm going to be on the road this weekend. We've got our first tournament. So we're doing the Thanksgiving turkey shootout tournament over in Hooksett, New Hampshire for Amelia's team. So I'll be road warrioring it. It's the first time we're getting a hotel room for hockey. And there's going to be a pool there, so she'll be able to hang out with her teammates and stuff. So it'll be a lot of fun. So I'll have some stories for the next recording session as well. But until then, guys, thanks again for tuning in and listening. We'll be back at you next Tuesday. And until then, peace.